It is very important that our Task 2 essays have a conclusion, but a conclusion doesn't have to be complicated. In today's video, we look at what a conclusion should and should not do, and then look at some of the common mistakes that our students make. Let's get into it. Welcome, my name is Eli and today we're focusing on conclusions. Now, first of all, we're going to focus on what a conclusion should and should not do. Let's have a look at the slides. So, they should and should not. What about this one? Summarize the ideas in the body paragraphs. What do you think? Should a conclusion summarize the ideas that you have mentioned in the body paragraph? Yes, they should. But should they introduce a new idea that is related to the question? No, they should not. Remember, in the conclusion, you want to simply restate the main ideas that you have mentioned in your essays. You don't want to introduce a new idea. Even if you come up with a great idea that is very relevant to the question, if you're writing your conclusion, this is not the time to write that great idea. Writing this idea in your conclusion and introducing a new idea will actually get you a lower score. So don't write any new ideas in the conclusion. Should you restate your position, your opinion? Yes. Now remember, many Task 2 questions, for example, agree, disagree, advantage, disadvantage, and discussion essays, ask explicitly for your opinion. They say, do you agree? Or do you think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? For these kinds of questions, you should be writing your opinion, your position, in the introduction and the conclusion as well. You can also write it in the body paragraphs. If you don't have it in the introduction and the conclusion, you can lose marks. Should we start our conclusion with in conclusion or to conclude? Yes. This makes it very clear to the examiner that our essay has a conclusion, and that's what we want. If it doesn't have a conclusion, we can lose marks. So make it very obvious to the examiner that your essay has a conclusion. Finally, should our conclusion be long? Well, no. 1 to 3 sentences is usually enough. We're simply restating our ideas and restating our position, our opinion. It shouldn't be longer, for example, than a body paragraph. Okay, let's have a look at an example. Here's a question that we've used in previous videos. Teenagers should have regular exams at secondary school, as this will prepare them better for life after leaving school. To what extent do you agree or disagree? And here's a conclusion that one of our students wrote. In conclusion, I would argue that teenagers should be given regular exams at secondary school because they provide useful practice for future testing in further education and develop a range of skills that help teenagers when they start work. So, does this conclusion summarize the ideas in the paragraphs? Well, we can't see the body paragraphs, but we assume that it does. An essay like this probably has covered their first idea, that regular exams provide useful practice for further education, like university, and regular exams also develop a range of useful skills that will help teenagers when they finish school and start working. So they've simply restated their 2 ideas in the conclusion, and they haven't introduced any new ideas. So that's good. Restate your position. Does the student do that? Well, yes. They say, I would argue that teenagers should be given regular exams at secondary school. And do they start with in conclusion or to conclude? Yes, They start with in conclusion. They make it very obvious to the examiner that their essay has a conclusion. Okay, let's look at some other common mistakes that students tend to make. The first one is not writing a conclusion. This is a very big mistake because not writing a conclusion will dramatically lower your score. Remember to give yourself enough time for the conclusion, even if it's a short one. It's really, really important that task 2 has a conclusion. Another common mistake is to write your hopes and fears in the conclusion. Here's an example. I hope that in the future there will be less testing for teenagers. Now, this does not answer the question. The question does not ask you about your hopes and fears for the future, and as a result, it's unnecessary. You simply need to restate your position. So for example, your opinion about whether exams do or do not help teenagers in their post-school life. Again, don't make suggestions for your country. Here's an example. I think that schools in China should stop regular testing at school. We don't need this. Remember that IELTS questions are not usually country specific. If you focus on your country, you're not answering the question. IELTS questions tend to be general, about all countries, about ideas, not about specific situations or specific countries. Okay. We don't want to use in a nutshell, finally, in the end, in sum, in summary, or other words like this. They're not really appropriate. We can simply say in conclusion or to conclude. In a nutshell is a bit too informal, and in sum and in summary, well, it's not really a summary, it's a conclusion. These things are different. So better to say in conclusion or to conclude. Don't use memorized phrases. Have a look at this one. In conclusion, I firmly agree with the aforementioned statement. This sentence is obviously memorized and doesn't really say much. It doesn't show the student's level of English. Now, examiners are trained to see these kind of strategies, basically, when a student has a low level and attempts to memorize a piece of language that they can put into their essay. So don't use them. It creates a bad impression on the examiner, and the examiner will usually mark you lower for these memorized answers. Here's another example. In conclusion, every coin has two sides. This doesn't really say anything, and it's obviously a memorized statement. Instead, we should attempt to answer the question from the task in our own words. Okay, I hope that's helped. You should have now looked at a video on how to write an introduction, how to write the body paragraph, and how to write the conclusion. So you are more than ready to start practicing all of the different essay types. Best of luck with that, and best of luck with your studies, and I'll see you next time.